So welcome to PT Podcast with Eric, the final edition for 2015, and we hope everyone had a lovely Christmas. So we have our first baby question with Gina, and we hope there's a congratulations in there. It is, hey Eric, here is the topic for you. What are the best exercises to get your flat tummy back after a baby? So an interesting issue, especially with women wanting to get back, and we look at a lot of things in the media, in Hollywood, and a lot of these movie stars getting back into shape straight away. And what is the process in doing so? Well, first of all, it is a timely process. So you must get assessed by the physiotherapist at the hospital to ensure that the separation in your abdominal wall is sufficient enough for you to exercise again. If it is of a certain width, then you would have to see physiotherapy care post childbirth. So that's the first and foremost. But if you did get the all clear and you're ready to exercise again, I think it's important that you do it in a timely process, in the sense that you have just given birth, you're carrying a newborn, which you may or may not have done before, so there's lumbar strain and so on, and also just holding a baby throughout the day. So when you're exercising, I think you need to understand what is actually happening to the abdominal wall. So firstly, it's been stretched, and we all know that. So it's going to retract over time, and that can be quite a painful process for a lot of women as well. Some women actually wear corsets as well to give some support to their abdominal wall as they are in pregnancy or while their abdominal wall is retracting. So I think first and foremost, get out of the thought of mind that I'm going to do some sit-ups or I'm going to do crunches. First and foremost, we must understand what is actually happening to our abdominal wall. So the best way to explain it, we have the top of the barrel. And the top of the barrel is like the lid, okay? And that's where our diaphragm sits. And then we have the bottom of the barrel. Now that's more towards our pelvis, more towards the pubis symphysis, where the baby is born. So that is the bottom of the barrel, and that's where your pelvic floor also comes into play. And that is a big issue when we're talking about childbirth and the pressure on our abdominal wall and so on. It can have effects on that as well. So then we've got the very important group of muscles that wrap around the body, okay? And that's in a transverse direction, okay? So it's wrapping around the body. Now, that is called your transverse abdominis, and that's the one I really want to spend some time on today, Gina. And a lot of people think they need to do sit-ups, they need to do crunches, but believe it or not, it is that transverse abdominis, or a TA, which you may see on the net. That's the important muscle that you must try to strengthen again to pull in your abdominal wall. A lot of clients that I see, female clients, they say, Eric, I want to lose some weight, I want to pull in my waistline, and believe it or not, it's actually not about their waistline in terms of body fat percentage. It's a weakness in this transverse abdominis. So if you strengthen that muscle, then you will start to retract your whole waistline. Now, how do you do so? So in a short way, because this is something we do in our workshops at the Fitness Embassy, is that you need to try and draw in your navel into your spine, okay? Now, I highly recommend that you do this laying on your back so that you have lumbar support and you're in a relaxed state as well. And then your pelvis is a neutral state as well. And that's really important because we try to engage too many muscles at once, and especially after the trauma of giving birth, we need to go back to basics. So the best way to explain it, if you can visualize this, you're laying on your back and you have your knees bent, okay? So that your pelvis is in a neutral state. And then you're going to take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, you're going to make yourself nice and tall and skinny and try to expose as much of your rib cage as possible. And as you do that, you're going to then pull your navel or your belly button down towards into your spine and into the floor. Now, as you do that, you're going to try and switch on this transverse abdominis muscle. Now, it's very important that less is more when it comes to this exercise, okay? You're not trying to do crunches. You're just trying to activate that muscle group, which then will wrap around to your back and so on, okay? So once again, you're laying on your back, knees bent, pelvis neutral, take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, you're going to draw up nice and tall, try to expose as much of your rib cage as possible, and then pull your navel into your spine. Now, the last phase in this process is you're going to try and stop yourself from urinating, okay? Now, from when you're trying to stop yourself from urinating, you're activating your pelvic floor. Okay. Now, once again, there's two parts to your pelvic floor. There's the frontal and the rectal as well. So you want to keep out of the rectal side of your inner pelvis. Okay, so you want to keep it more towards how we urinate, or imagine yourself drawing up a zipper. Okay, in a pair of jeans rather than squeezing your buttocks. Okay, so once again, final stage, deep breath in, take a deep breath out. Expose the ribs, okay, nice and tall, navel into your spine, and then finish it off by trying to draw up onto your pelvic floor. And then that is the best way that we teach people how post-trauma or post-back pain or lumbar pain or post-giving birth, that's the best way to draw into your waistline without actually doing crunches and doing damage to your spine. So if you have any questions, please send another message, but this is very important, and we do highly recommend that you do see a trainer for this or a physiotherapist, but this will get you started. So the next question is by Luke Trotz, and this was in the previous week's podcast, which now have made it into this week. And it is, what is the best practice when it comes to being physically healthy from cardio? Is it the aerobic style training of the long continuous style, such as road runs, or is it the combined aerobic and anaerobic style of interval and fartlek training? An area that has been in the media a lot recently throughout the year. A very good question, Luke, and there has so many variables to this. First and foremost, it's how much time do you have to exercise, and also what is your level of fitness. But let's say it's quite general, and you do have some time to exercise. So with this question, there is a key word there, and it's fartlek training. So for those who are unaware with fartlek training, it is like a type of training where you do intense exercise, and then you have a recovery period where you slow it down. For example, you might do some interval sprints running in a field, and then you slow it down and go through a jog, and then you go into sprint again, and you will vary that up. And they're saying that the peak and troughs over time allow you to have a recovery period. However, when you stand back from that, you actually see a straight line rather than these peaks and troughs if you were to stand way back from that graph. And as you do more of these intervals or fartlek training, in that one session, you are generally training harder every time. So it sort of compounds and it increases up the graph. So it is a good way of sort of psychologically getting through a hard session and sort of cheating yourself of training harder without you realizing it, because you know you're going to have a recovery session. So this type of question's a good one, but it really comes back to what style of training you actually do enjoy. Because someone like myself, a road run doesn't really do it for me, but for intervals where it's strong, intense training session, and I know psychologically it will finish sooner rather than later, I do enjoy that. And it also depends on your muscle twitch fibers. So if you have fast twitch muscle fibers, you're going to enjoy the more explosive fartlek training. If you have the slow twitch or more of the whiter twitch muscle fibers, which is more your marathon type of runner, you're going to enjoy the long distance endurance type of cardio. So few variables there, Luke. Very good question. It is in the media. You've got your HIIT training, you've got your high intensity interval training, which are variables of this type of fartlek training, but with a sports specificity to it. But generally, I think it depends what your goals are and where you would like to go, and first and foremost, what interests you. If you think you can do a road run and get away with it, that is great, if you have that time period. If you want to do more intense training in a short time period, then you can go with the fartlek training. So very good question. Aerobic versus anaerobic. It depends on whether you do enjoy the long distance running, which is more your aerobic style, and your anaerobic is your short, sharp, sprints. So we have a question from Christina Marie from a previous week's podcast that needs to be answered this week, and that is, how do you know if you're overtraining, or is there such a thing as overtraining? A very good question, because I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought, well, it's great that people are asking all these questions about overtraining rather than them saying, hey, I actually need to exercise. So first and foremost, that's a good thing. I think the best way to answer the question regarding overtraining is, first and foremost, what are the signs and symptoms that you are overtraining rather than am I overtraining? Because it depends, it's all relative. So someone who is an elite athlete, they can handle a greater load of exercise and intensity of exercise over a longer period than someone who is only a beginner. So therefore, the beginner would be definitely overtraining for their level of fitness, whereas the athlete, they wouldn't. They probably need to even step it up relative to their competitors. So the signs and symptoms of overtraining, now there is a long list, but the most important ones would be, first of all, am I still interested in what I'm doing? So if you're still enjoying the exercise, then that is a sign that you are not overtraining. Have your gains or results started to diminish, or have they regressed? So that might be your strength, it may be your endurance, it may be your ability to finish a workout, and you may be just really tired in your training sessions. So these could be signs and symptoms. Early fatigue is a good indicator, but also a loss of libido is a very good indicator that someone is overtraining. So and a change in mood as well. A loss of appetite is another example where there is overtraining as well. So I find these are the signs and symptoms that we should be looking out for, rather than that idea of am I overtraining or not. So it's better to look at whether you are, regarding what your body is telling you. So Christina, I hope this helps you, and I hope you don't have these signs and symptoms, but definitely something to look out for. So we have another question by George Mazouros, and this is regarding stretching. So stretching before or after a workout? If so, what type of stretching? Does the stretching depend on the exercise? Very good question. A lot of controversy around stretching, and what we try and encourage clients to do regarding stretching is that you would start with dynamic stretching, and that is a way of stretching through movement. Okay, it's not an isolated type of stretch or an isometric stretch where you're just holding that and trying to lengthen the fibers. It's something that can cause a lot of injury, and it's something you should do later in your session, or once you've warmed up a bit, maybe on a bike or on a stepper and so on, or going for a walk. But dynamic stretching is a very sports specific stretching. So for example, a martial artist will stretch or start stretching dynamically through warming up, very differently to someone who is a cricketer, for example, or someone who plays tennis or soccer and so on. So knowing what type of stretches to do for your particular sport is very important. So if you're going to play a lower limb type of sport, such as soccer, you want to warm up the hips, obviously the thighs, the quads, the hamstrings, the ankle joints and so on, do some internal and external rotation and so on. If you're in a throwing type of sport using the upper limbs, then you want to do a lot more shoulder rotation, shoulder circumduction, where you're moving the whole shoulder joint and so on, and warming up the joint that way. A lot of people think stretching is where you just lay on the floor, do a rotation stretch, or you're doing a thigh stretch and pulling on your quadricep. Now, those type of stretching still are valid, but they're sort of an old school traditional way of stretching. And it's something that's really important for coaches who are out there coaching young children, understanding for their level of sport what type of stretches to do, because you can actually affect performance regarding doing inability type of stretching that will slow down their responses when they're actually playing the sport, especially such as hamstrings and hamstring strains. So when we're looking at, does the stretching depend on the exercise? Yes, it does. So let's say, I'll give you the example that we're in the gym, in the gymnasium. So if I'm going to do bench press, I may stretch my pectorals with my arm outward away from the midline of the body, okay, to lengthen those fibers. But then when I do a cable fly, then that is using the same fibers, but now it's actually strengthening them under load. So I have stretched the fibers using the same movement in what I'm actually going to do in that movement. So I think that's really important. When you're doing a particular stretch, try to think of the movement and replicate that in a stretch that you're then going to do in a strengthen movement. So for example, if I'm going to do a squat, then I may do a Bulgarian squat or a stretch where my thigh is being stretched downward with my shin on a bench. Okay, so it can be regarded as an exercise, but really I would see that as a stretch. And then I would lean back to really encourage the hip flexors to switch on. Now, that is a good stretch that I would do before I actually squat. So believe it or not, certain stretches can be regarded as exercises, especially when we look at dynamic stretching and so on. So hopefully this answers your question, George. But feel free to ask me more questions because it is a huge topic. I can talk on this for hours regarding, post-isometric relaxation stretching, muscular facilitation stretching, so PNF stretching. That it's a plethora of a topic. So please ask away for any questions that you may further have. Our next question by Karen MC. Eric, why does your metabolism slow down as you get older? A very good question because there's a lot of misconceptions about that key word there, and that's metabolism. A lot of people think our metabolism is about I can eat anything I can and I've got a high metabolism and I lose weight. So we get this concept of metabolism to do with how fast or how well we break down food. But believe it or not, the key word metabolism is regarding our thyroid and how efficient our thyroid function is, and that relates to our endocrine system. So our thyroid affects our basal metabolic rate. So indirectly it does, but not first and foremost. So our thyroid will stimulate our metabolism through oxygen consumption. What it does is it uses adenosine triphosphate or ATP for energy, and that's how we then start using our muscles and so on and start to function, which in turn affects our metabolism. So our thyroid does affect our fat metabolism. If you think of an obvious one with an infant, okay, and our heart rate alters as we change in age. So an infant's heart rate is very different to someone in their 70s, okay? So it all links together, but first and foremost, it's regarding our thyroid. Our maximal heart rate also changes as we get older, so it will lower over time, okay? Now, our thyroid affects our cardiac output and in turn our heart rate that way. It also affects our lipid and our fat metabolism, okay, which is really the type of question that you are asking, and why does it slow down? It also affects our carbs and our carbohydrate metabolism, so how well we break down and use carbohydrates, which in turn, okay, will then affect us for this ATP and this energy production, okay, and that's why oxygen is very important. So it allows the amount of glucose or sugar to go into our muscle cells, which in turn is used with insulin, and then it produces energy and so on. So our metabolism can slow down. It does slow down over time with age, but that's also because our thyroid function changes as we get older as well. So a question that has so much science involved to it, but I think the main thing is, as long as we're exercising, we're doing resistance training along with oxygen or along with cardiorespiratory exercise, combining those two functions of movement together, that will be the optimal condition in order for us to maintain or lose weight during that time of metabolism. Okay, and there's a lot of misconceptions out there. The theory was that your premenopausal weight, okay, so let's say you were, 70 kilos at the time when you're leading into your menopause, okay, that's the weight that you will hold post-menopause, okay? But now we're realizing that can actually be challenged and you can actually lose weight post-menopause, okay? So it all comes back to having resistance training with cardiorespiratory exercise, okay, and just eating a balanced diet as well. So I'm going to answer Troy McNamara's question really quickly because I hope I answered it with Christina Marie's question. And it's, Eric, in your last podcast, you spoke about overtraining. Are you still overtraining if you are eating enough amounts of good foods and taking suitable vitamins to sustain your body? So once again, Troy, I think it depends on the signs and symptoms of your body. So if you feel that you are overtraining because of your interest levels, your libido, your gains in the gym are diminishing, I think then no matter how much food or nutrients you are taking, you're still overtraining. So sometimes psychologically we can think that we're not overtraining because we mask it with a lot of food and vitamins and supplements. But I think if you are looking at those signs and symptoms first and foremost, then that will be your best indicator. And no amount of good food or vitamins will mask that. So that wraps up our PT podcast with Eric for 2015. I hope the responses have been insightful and have guided you in some form. 2016, we're looking forward to it because we'll get our friends and fitness professionals on board responding to your questions as well. And we hope everyone is having a happy and safe holiday and look forward to what the new year brings.